In the 1950s, America had broken free from the shackles of wartime economics. It was walking with the swagger of a nation that had the world by the tail. Scientists had harnessed nuclear energy. Jet-propelled airplanes were breaking speed records, and the race to space was on. But perhaps more than anything else, one thing melded imagination and consumerism, putting this era in perfect context. The concept car. Unlike satellites, rockets, and jet planes, these dream cars were accessible. People flocked to auto shows to see concept cars in their titanium-bodied glory. They were snapshots of how America perceived its future. They were simply out of sight, unforgettable. But what happened to them? Most were destroyed. Some just plain vanished. But amazingly, some are still here.
The wings in the back almost touch the points, very much like a flying bat. I've also heard people say very similar to the manta ray underwater when it flows its wings. So very unique. Everyone was amazed.
I think that the designs that were coming out of Italy in particular were very appealing. It gave Chrysler a chance to explore different shapes, different ideas, and it also created some excitement with the public about what Chrysler was able to do.
Reintroducing the 1954 Alfa Romeo Bat7 and the 1954 Dodge Fire Arrow 4. In Connecticut, the U.S. Navy launches the first ever nuclear-powered submarine. Inventor George Devall invents Unimate, the world's first industrial robot, a programmable machine that would eventually help build cars at a GM assembly plant. The realms of research and technology are blazing into the future. The automotive industry is keeping pace, and America isn't the only country with its eyes focused on the horizon. This is the 1954 Alfa Romeo Bat7.
When you look at Bat7, part of the design in aerodynamics was to keep everything slipstream. The wings in the back almost touch the points, very much like a flying bat. I've also heard people say very similar to the manta ray underwater when it flows its wings. So very unique. It's an exercise of the coach company, Bertone, but they were on Alfa Romeo chassis. And to turn out something like this, so different, so unique, we haven't seen something like that in a long time.
Despite its uniquely menacing appearance, the name BAT is actually an acronym for its true Italian name, Berlinetta Aerodinamica Tecnica. There weren't 7 of them, and the Bat7 wasn't the first of its kind. This outrageous automobile was the follow-up to the original Bat5.
So, Bat5 appears in 1953. They go on, we're assuming and know from history that it created business for them at a time that they were struggling post-World War II. Following year comes about and they go to who else but their head designer, build us another car that's going to just wow the world and bring us more business.
The 1953 Alfa Romeo Bat5 achieved its goal. It drew unprecedented attention on the European auto show circuit. Naturally, the public demanded a follow-up, and the expectations for the 1954 Alfa Romeo Bat7 were enormous.
I think they really wanted to make a statement that next year. They knew the response they got from the Bat5, and now I think they wanted to really step it up one more notch and see how the world would take it. And if they did, now they've hit a home run basically, and what they've set in motion on their design is ahead of everyone else. You know, I heard a story that there was the anticipation of what was Bertone going to do. And so there was a lot of rumble, and when they unveiled and set it out, it was even that much more grander, and I think it met the expectations of the rumors of what the people wanted, and it just, everyone was amazed.
The curious curves of the Bat brood were positively magnetic. They had a story to tell, and they drew people in.
To look at the extreme of Bat7, just looking at the rear wings, and how much farther they go back. They nearly touch. No one had ever seen anything like that.
The 1954 Alfa Romeo Bat7's organic beauty was the result of more than just pure unbridled imagination. It was a marketing tool, but the real reason for this car's existence was the continuation of a groundbreaking experiment in aerodynamic research.
The unique feature of Bat7 are the wings. You look at the variations from the Bat5 to Bat7, they actually extended the wings farther forward in the door, and they start rising up all the way to the back to where they almost touch and peak. They also incorporated a center wing for stability, similar to what airplanes have on their tail. If you look at the rear wings and look at the openings, it's much bigger. Now they build a bigger wing, they've got to deal with low pressure, high pressure drag going around these wings, and they've got bigger slats to stabilize the airflow, and I'm sure the car at over 100 miles an hour is very stable. Another feature of the Bat7 is opening the door. Here we have a push button and a suicide door. Also, by getting in, retracting the headlamps is also quite special. There's a lever under the dash. By pulling, drops the headlights down.
Every inch of the Bat7's tantalizing body was dedicated to minimizing wind resistance. The result? This car's Alfa Romeo chassis was suddenly capable of doing extraordinary things.
High-speed test, they clocked it at well over 125 miles an hour at over red line, but that was so much faster than a production bodied car built by some other coach company possibly, that they couldn't understand how it could be, and it's because of the design.
In the world of concept cars, the public's reaction to an auto show debut can never be predicted. Some concept cars are so well received that an invitation to the assembly line is warranted. There's no question that the 1954 Bat7's impact was dramatic, but is there such a thing as too dramatic?
Those wings, in some respect, people just can't imagine, oh, that's just a design exercise. There's no way this could ever be put into production. There are a lot of phenomenal designs out there, and ultimately when designs are presented to manufacturers, a lot of things are going on. I still think when you look at these cars, they're way too advanced for the general population to buy.
In the end, the 1954 Alfa Romeo Bat7 was never mass-produced. But its fan base in Italy and around the world continued to grow. The public demand for the completion of the Bat trilogy was enough to inspire the creation of the 1955 Alfa Romeo Bat9. In the 1950s, there was no shortage of spectacular concept cars, both in North America and Europe. Sadly, many of them vanished as quickly as they appeared, exiled from the warm glow of the spotlight and thrust into a cold reality, consumed by the crusher or enveloped by the obscurity of the private market. Luckily, the 1954 Alfa Romeo Batch 7 survived this fate, but not without a few bumps and bruises along the way.
Now, I've seen photos of them, of 7, where the rear wings were removed completely, cut off. They were kept. Person liked the car, just didn't like the big wings. Obviously, we're fortunate that they were reattached by the next owner who saw the significance.
Luckily for the Bat 7, its journey has come full circle, fully restored to its original glory and flanked by its spectacular siblings. This blue streak now rests its wings in the sanctuary of the Black Hawk Automotive Museum in Danville, California.
I like them because they're beautiful. I mean, it's really just about the beauty of the car. I mean, they almost reach the boneyard. And what you do is you just kind of try to teach people and yourself about what the great cars were and how did they evolve. And I'm really into design. I think that's the premise of our museum is design, not mechanics. Don't go through and spend too much time talking about the horsepower, the cubic engine, and the stroke, and that's a different kind of museum. Ours is an art museum, and if you look around, you'll see that there's very little, if anything, on the walls on either floor, and it's about the automobile as art, and we try to light the cars as art.
In 1954, while European car companies were giving birth to entire families of concept cars, American car companies were handing out a few cigars of their own.
I think it gave Chrysler a chance to explore different shapes, different ideas. And so you have millions of people that are coming in to look at these models and being excited by that look.
(1954). It's been 9 years since American GIs returned home from World War II with a new affinity for European culture. In just 2 short years, Lucy's Italian movie, one of the most popular episodes of I Love Lucy, would hit the airwaves and add fuel to this Italian obsession. America's passion for all things Italian is burning brightly, and the automotive industry is adding a little fuel of its own. This is the 1954 Dodge Fire Arrow 4.
I think that the designs that were coming out of Italy in particular were very appealing to an American. So I think when Chrysler decides to go off and look for a coach building company, to go over to Europe, especially the Italian designers, and try to do something with some concept car series, it makes a lot of sense. Remember, these are making their runs of the car shows. And so you have millions of people that are coming in to look at these models and being excited by that look.
By 1954, the auto show circuit was laden with ultra-modern space-age concept cars. Chrysler wanted to take a different approach and stand out from the futuristic flock. The Fire Arrow 4's Dodge chassis wasn't unique, but its design was. This luscious body was handcrafted by famous Italian coach builder Ghia, but not before being penned by legendary automotive designer Virgil Exner.
Exner is an interesting guy because he studied art at Notre Dame, then goes off to work for Raymond Loewy, the great industrial designer who did everything from Coke bottles to locomotives. He moves to Studebaker after that, and then winds up at Chrysler. And he has a certain design style. A lot of the designers do. They're very much like a good art historian could look at a piece and go, oh, that's so-and-so. Once you get familiar with a designer's work, it's rare that you can look at something and attribute it to somebody else because they have certain styles to them, and Exner does. And you can still see some automotive and airplane-related elements to his cars. I think one of his big features is You can look at the big long hood, and that's an Exner feature.
By the time the Dodge Fire Arrow 4 was designed, Virgil Exner's brushstrokes were prominent on the canvas of the automotive design world. This Rosa Italiana was the fourth and final member of the famed Dodge Fire Arrow family. Every Fire Arrow design is unique, but there is a strong genetic resemblance. Of the four Italian-inspired designs, the Fire Arrow 3 was the only hardtop. Because of this, the Fire Arrow 4's closest relative was actually the Fire Arrow 2.
There are differences and similarities between them. What strikes me as maybe the biggest similarity is this large jet intake for the radiator. You saw that almost identically on the Fire Arrow number 2, but no wing in the middle. Now we just have the open space. Dual headlights here. Again, we're getting closer to a production car. No front bumper, but pieces that could be at some point. Some very modern marker lamps up front. Some interesting features on the side of the radiator cowling, those double metal pieces, which I think add some interest and visual appeal to it. Very comfortable bucket seats to sit in, and every time you look over there, you get that kind of 50s feeling looking at that diamond pattern. Neat little feature in the middle of the steering wheel is this little clock, which I'm not sure what the mechanism is supposed to do, but it's very interesting. We are at the very back of Fire Arrow number 4. So you have a couple of things that are of interest here. Again, really no back bumper. It's a concept car, so that feature isn't here to keep the back end looking clean, but you do have the beginnings of a back bumper with these features. The tail lights are again very interesting because they have, of course, the red lens here, but another kind of space-agey feature with this chrome element right in the middle of them. And also here are those double exhausts, one on top of the other on each side.
For many ultra-modern concept cars of this era, practicality wasn't even on the radar. The Dodge Fire Arrow 4 stood out from its peers, not only because of its sensual handmade curves, but also because it was the most roadworthy member in this series. But would these design efforts increase its chances of being mass-produced? In 1954, Chrysler released a series of Italian-inspired show cars. The 1954 Dodge Fire Arrow 4 was the final member to join the family. It was also the most practical. In a world of deliberate one-offs and sensationally unrealistic dream cars, would the Fire Arrow 4 be able to make the rare move from the auto show circuit to the assembly line?
I think Chrysler's intent was to actually wind up with a production automobile out of it, in that combination between themselves, Ghia, and Exner. There are door handles, there's a heater, there's radio. Number 4 has a foldable top, a convertible top. And number 4 is probably the closest to what we would call a production automobile. It doesn't get there, but it's close.
Despite the roadworthiness of this bright red cherry, Chrysler took a pass on a factory production run. But another Detroit-based automotive company didn't. Dual Motors liked the design enough to write another chapter in the Dodge Fire Arrow story.
Chrysler at the end of it all says, gee, let's not do this. And they sell the rights off to another company who does take a design very similar to number 4 and put it into a small production run. They produced, I think, about 170 or 175 automobiles that if you were to pull number 4 up to that car, you could certainly see the parentage there. The dual Ghia was very popular with people who wanted an automobile that was different looking, but had a certain European elegance to it. And I think that's where the Italian coach building comes in.
The 1954 Dodge Fire Arrow 4 did inspire a high-end boutique-style production of dual gears. Fortunately, everyday Americans never got to cruise the streets in a mass-produced version of the Dodge Fire Arrow 4. But there's no question that the crescendo of the Fire Arrow series made a lasting impression.
When you look at the Chrysler products late in the 50s, you can see a lot of the influence of the Fire Arrows in those. It sort of jump-started them a little bit more forward into the 50s.
In the golden era of concept cars, making the jump from the auto show to the assembly line was a rarity. The 1954 Dodge Fire Arrow 4, as it existed, didn't make the cut, but it came closer than most.
Well, I think maybe one of the sad features out of that is somebody didn't look at number 4 and say, gee, let's do something with this. It's already there.
Chrysler moved on from the Fire Arrow series. The fourth and final member of this large Italian family was beautiful, but the life of last year's concept car wasn't always pretty.
A lot of cars did wind up in the crusher. People did buy them, drive them for X number of years. The car started to get old and cranky on them, and they went out and bought something else, and the car wound up in the junkyard. So like these guys, and a lot of cars that are in this museum, wound up here because they either went into a collector's hands or they may have even been abandoned for a period of time and stuck in a barn somewhere. And that's how they survived to be here today.
Almost 60 years after its debut, the Dodge Fire Arrow 4 is now fully restored and safely in the hands of the Blackhawk Automotive Museum in Danville, California. It stands as a stunning reminder of Chrysler's daring foray into the world of Italian automotive design.
Virgil Exner did a lot of great designs, and when you look at a lot of the designs like the Fire Arrow series, that's Italian bodies. Those aren't American thoughts. That's sculptured in Italy. I've always been a fan of cars where the chassis, the drivetrain, is built in one country and the body is built in another country. I call them international cars. You know, when I don't care if it's an American body on a European chassis or vice versa. It doesn't matter. It's unique to me.